Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. This is how one unexpected meeting can not only radically change the life of one person and save another. Having learned the bitter experience, you begin to appreciate every happy moment, every new opportunity, and those who love you, sincerely and freely. Camille's life was difficult from the very childhood. Despite the fact that the girl was born into a family, quite a successful entrepreneur, Stephen was quite successful in pharma. He worked with large chains and supplied medicines to pharmacies. But in those days, the competition was tough. As a result, the family constantly lived in fear. The production was often attacked and ruined by people dissatisfied with the quality and cost of medicines. Even the workers themselves went on strike, demanding that they be given free products. Stephen struggled to control the state of his business and the company's quality, productivity, and profitability. At times, it was easy enough to do so, and in those intervals, the family could afford a life of luxury. But the moment the mass strikes started again, and there was damage to equipment, components for the creation of medicines, and so on, life became difficult. Not only had to cut all possible expenses, but also had to hide from disgruntled people. After all, the threat was for each member of the family entrepreneur. In general, by the standards of the 90s, the family lived quite well. They had their own housing. They could afford to buy clothes every season and had no need for food. But that was only until Stephen's business went bankrupt. As much as the man tried to rehabilitate himself in his direction, find new suppliers and investors, it was never possible to restore the former company. Hard times began for the family. Stephen had a wife, Emily, and a daughter, who was 16 years old at the time, Camille. The woman did not work, but only took care of the household, doing her best to make sure that her daughter received a decent education and grew up to be an excellent hostess. She taught Camille how to serve her properly. Table server to a huge number of dishes told about the history of the country and the world, helped in solving homework, and supported in all endeavors. The relationship between them was trusting. The girl told about all the joys and worries of them. Parents tried to buy Camille the most fashionable outfits, various scientific books and magazines that were interesting to her. They often took the girl to new cities and gave her to all kinds of circles so that she could find her vocation in life and decide on her favorite line of work. By the age of 16, Camille already knew for sure that she wanted to become a famous chef. That after the last year of school, she would definitely go to university and get the desired profession. But life has arranged otherwise. It was in the year when the girl was to finish school. Her father's business was completely destroyed. The family did not have any means of subsistence left, and the possibility of sending her daughter to another city to study at the best university. Not anymore. Parents did not say anything to Camille about plans for the future, and every time tried in every possible way to postpone this conversation. But the girl once found herself in the right place at the right time, and was able to hear that conversation, which not only shocked her, but made her horrified by the indifference and hypocrisy of her parents in relation to herself. "We had a life to come back to," Camille's father said, glaring menacingly at his wife. It was obvious that she did not particularly like the man's proposal and that she strongly doubted the necessity of agreeing to it. "Nothing terrible will happen. She'll love him and everything will be fine. You'll see. And we'll go on living our lives without denying ourselves anything. And we're not eating the last of the pasta." "How can you do that?" Camille's mother said sadly. "We can't just decide her fate on our own. What if he's not as good as you say he is? What if she just doesn't like him? And then she'll have to live her whole life with a man she doesn't like." Emily looked at her husband with some pain in her eyes. He looked completely calm and determined. It was obvious that the man was determined and that no amount of persuasion would change his mind. Camille, who stood quietly outside the door, did not yet realize that she was the one in question, although she had an inkling of it. The essence of the problem was also unclear. All that was clear was that her parents were talking about some guy she should like. The girl began to listen carefully to the further conversation of her parents. Everything would be fine. She was old enough and independent enough to start a separate family life. They would live like this for a couple of years, and then they could get married. If they do well, the man said, and then poured himself something into a glass at the table. But what makes you so sure our daughter will like that guy? And we don't know him at all. What if he turns out to be just a cruel tyrant who will just abuse her? We from the whole family know only his father, and that's it. Emily was outraged by her husband's cold and indifferent attitude towards her daughter. If the father is normal, the son will be normal too, answered Camille's father. We have no other choice anyway, either to die in poverty or to give my daughter in marriage. The second option is much better. And Camille will live in luxury and will be able to afford an excellent education in the future, and we will not need anything, because we will get a part of the Voloshina family business. There was silence in the kitchen. It was clear that everyone was thinking about something else. And at the time when Stephen was already thinking about how best to play the acquaintance and quickly play the wedding ceremony, his wife was thinking, how could one so easily dispose of another person's life, and how would their daughter be accepted in her new family? Camille stood in utter shock after hearing what she had heard and could not believe that her parents were willing to give her in marriage to an unloved man whom she had never even seen simply for money. In order to get a piece of some company and improve her financial situation, she went to her room, thinking over what she had heard and not understanding how to behave and what to do in the situation. Should she refuse her father's plan or agree to his proposal? After all, they had done everything possible to provide her with a carefree life for so many years. Should she sacrifice her own happiness for the benefit of her parents, or should she refuse to sacrifice and build her life according to her own decisions? On this day, her parents did not say anything to Camille, but she was already thinking over all the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. As a result, coming to a final decision was not as easy as it seemed initially. The girl was panicky and constantly pensive, and it was difficult not to notice it. So it went on for several days. And then Emily did not endure and decided to talk to her daughter heart to heart. The dream is the beginning. She opens the door to Camille's room. Did something happen to you? You've been sad lately. Is there a problem at school, or did you have another fight with your girlfriend? She sat down on the edge of the bed, clearly indicating that she was expecting an answer from the girl. Camille hesitated for a few moments. Should she discuss her worries with her mother? After all, they hadn't told her anything about a fiancé or marriage. Perhaps they would decide everything on their own, and they would give up the decision and find another option to get back on track financially. Besides, there was still hope that the conversation was not about her, although exactly the opposite was clear from the dialogue of her parents. The girl decided to deal with the situation on her own for the time being, trying not to involve her parents, so that the decision would be made exclusively by her, and for all the consequences she was also responsible for herself. No, I'm fine. It's just that I've already started to prepare for the exams, and I'm very tired of it all. The girl shifted her gaze to the woman, who looked no less worried and loaded than she did. What's wrong with you? You've been kind of sad lately, too. The question clearly took Emily by surprise. She wasn't ready to discuss her husband's plan with her daughter. And so, just like Camille, she decided to keep her problems quiet and divert the conversation away from her daughter, so as not to arouse any suspicion. You know my father's out of work. It's made life a lot harder. You've got debts, you've got to eat, and you'll be graduating soon, and you'll have to continue your studies. And our situation leaves much to be desired. The woman took a deep breath, and it became clear how worried she was about her daughter's future. I think maybe I should get a job. I have a degree in seamstressing. I can take orders or go to the sewing shop. I'll get the hang of it, and I'll be good at it. Emily smiled, looking at her daughter. Who's going to take care of the house then? You won't have time to do everything yourself after work. And Dad's hardly ever home now. He's always looking for ways to start earning again, and get back to his own business. It turns out that the house will not look so well maintained and attractive, and the flower garden will have to be abandoned. There would be no one to take care of it. Camille looked at her mother. She looked at her mother, looking away from another Russian test. The woman said nothing. She just sat with her head down and did not understand what she should do in this situation. On the one hand, there was really not enough money to live on, and on the other hand, so much time and effort had been invested in the garden to achieve the result that is now, and therefore Emily could not just give it up. "Come on, Mom," the girl muttered, seeing how hard it was for the woman during this period. "We will solve everything. You do not worry. And I can also go to work after school, and then everything will be fine. And university, I'll finish a little later, when I have some free money. Or I'll just take night courses. They've become very fashionable lately." "Yes, honey, everything will be all right," said the girl's mother, still in the same depressed and frustrated voice. "The main thing is to believe in yourself and never give up on your dreams, and then everything will be fine." The woman was about to leave the room when she stopped and added, saying each word in a barely audible voice, "The main thing is to make all decisions thoughtfully. Otherwise, you can lose all the joys of life. Remember that the most precious thing you have is yourself, and other people should be responsible for their own life and fate." After that, the woman left the room, barely leaving her all alone without waiting for an answer. This only made it worse. After all, the girl was already sure that she would agree to a relationship with a strange guy just to help her parents establish their condition and affairs. But now, after her mother's words, there were again doubts about how Camille's life would turn out if she could not fall in love with a guy. A few days flew by. The weekend was approaching. Camille was studying hard to pass her final exams at school. Her mother was tending to the house and garden as usual, while her father was always looking for a job that would bring the family back to its former prosperity. Emily never went to get a job. Her husband was adamantly opposed to such an idea, and after a brief argument, the woman still yielded to him. In addition, she herself married quite early and never worked. Therefore, she is possessed by fear and worries about the success of work in her direction. Although, by the way, she has perfectly graduated from a specialized secondary school and even had some awards for professionalism. Friday evening, Stephen returned home a little early and from the doorstep announced to his wife about tomorrow's important dinner. "Tomorrow we are to have some very important guests. Christopher and his son. They'll be here at 6 o'clock and everything should be ready by then. Today I helped him find a new area of distribution, and now he wants to discuss further business matters that might help us become business owners again. Co-owners, to be exact." The man was very happy about this arrangement, and it was obvious that he was already looking forward to tomorrow, or rather, tonight. "Is this the guy we discussed?" Emily asked with some sadness, looking at her husband. Yes, that's the guy. He's very bright, and I had a personal interaction with him today. Polite, courteous. I told you it was gonna be great, and you were worried and stressed out. And now all you have to do is say Camille. No. What? The woman's making a fuss. She can't just walk in and say her future husband is coming over tomorrow. It would cause her great psychological trauma. She has to love him, and we're just gonna help her love him. It's better for everyone, and she won't blame us in the future for choosing the wrong husband in case of any problems. Jesus, Emily, we don't have time for all this planning and games. Camille, grown-up girl, she must realize that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Besides, the guy's normal, and he really likes her. I showed him the pictures today, and he really wants to meet her. And it will all work out, Stephen replied. After that, he headed towards his daughter's room in high spirits. Wait, I'm telling you. Emily rushed after him, stopping him abruptly with a jerk of her arm. I'll talk to her about everything myself. Okay, not you. You're not gonna be able to properly explain to her what's going on. and we'll end up without a daughter." The woman looked anxious and worried. "Okay, the idea is you talk to her, but no games. She should understand perfectly well that this guy is our salvation, and they should be fine. Let her do whatever it takes to get him to like her and build a happy future with him. If the fool doesn't, everything will work out just fine." The man looked troubled to some extent, but also as relaxed as possible. He did not even doubt that everything should go the best way, that his daughter would agree to marry the guy, and that they would subsequently get a part of a very profitable and prosperous business. The man had no conscience for pursuing his own selfish goals, for possibly ruining his daughter's future. Emily slowly made her way up to Camille's room. She didn't know how to properly present all the information and how to make sure her daughter didn't think she was just being used as a source of income, although in fact she was. Despite the fact that the woman was strongly opposed to this arrangement and the development of her child's life story, she simply could not cross her husband. She could not say anything in response, so as not to end up with nothing on the street, no job and no loved ones around. And here she is already knocking on the door, still not realizing exactly what to say. On the one hand, she blames her husband for trying to get money any way he can, even to the detriment of the dearest person in his life. On the other hand, she consoled herself with the fact that her husband was doing all this only for the sake of improving their welfare, so that they would not starve and would not need anything. After a brief lull, Camille's voice was heard, which was calm and at the same time sad and depressed. "Are you coming in? Or should I come out to you? Why just stand outside the door?" Emily opened the door and headed towards her daughter's bed, which she sat on every time she talked. There was complete silence in the room for a few minutes, and then the girl couldn't stand it. "Mom, did you want something? Or did you just come to watch me study for the exam? I don't think it's very interesting. Besides, I'm distracted by you, so I can't concentrate on my assignments." Camille was somewhat tense and frustrated. Lately, she had been having some difficulties in her studies, which she tried to solve in every possible way. Without tutors, it was proving difficult to understand new topics and continue to do well in school. But the family could not afford their services. Therefore, the girl tried to learn new topics by any means and sew on them as many assignments as possible. "Yeah, honey, I wanted to talk to you. I just don't know how to start." The conversation was spoken by Emily, and lowered her head, wrinkled my nose. "But whatever it is, it still has to be said," Camille answered her. "That's right. Papa has invited a good acquaintance of his to dinner tomorrow, and he's coming with his son. The boy is very nice. Father says he's very polite and courteous, but tomorrow we'll know exactly how he is, and Dad and I need you to be at dinner too. It will not be nice that on the one hand, the child showed respect, and on the other hand, did not come." The woman was silent, trying to find the right words to continue the conversation. She didn't know how she could make her daughter understand that she would have to get along with the guy who was coming to dinner, and that she would have to build a very successful love relationship with him in the future. "The guy's name is John," Emily continued. "He's only a couple years older than you and already works for his father's company. He's an engineer. He is a very handsome young man who is working hard to develop in his direction and is ready to start a family." After this phrase, the woman raised her head to assess her daughter's reaction, but she just kept on solving the study option, not reacting in any way to the woman's words. "And Dad says that he really liked it. He showed pictures of you, and the guy was really into you. He really wants to meet you." Camille's mother was silent, not knowing what else to add to her speech. She couldn't tell her directly that she would have to marry a man of convenience and live with a complete stranger. She wouldn't even wish such a life on her enemy. And to be pushed into such a difficult decision. Her own daughter. Camille understood perfectly well. She remembered the conversation between her parents. And right after her mother had mentioned the dinner with her father's friend and his son, everything had become clear. The parents had found no other way to fix the financial situation and return to normal life. And so the only option left was to form an alliance between her and a strange guy to get a piece of the other family's business. Camille did not know how to react to the words of her mother, who was so carefully trying to tell her not the most pleasant news. She took a few minutes to go through her thoughts and mull over everything that was going on. After which she spoke calmly. "I hope that we'll get along well with him. Maybe we'll even have a good conversation, if he's really a good person." Camille mouthed. This without even taking her eyes off the book she was reading while sitting at the table. "I hope I'll make a good impression on all of them, too. Quite a good impression. I'll try my best to do so." The girl continued reading, in no other way, not responding to her mother's words. She could sense how difficult this conversation was making her feel, and so she made the decision to just sweetly agree to dinner and give hope that she would like the guy, and he would like her, and then everything would be just fine. Despite the fact that Camille has never met John yet, she already disliked him. On the one hand, there is the possibility that the guy himself is not in the best situation and just has to get married to somehow improve his family's condition. But on the other hand, how could he say he liked her if they'd never met in their lives? So he judged a girl solely on her looks, which is the worst trait in a man. In Camille's opinion, she herself never judged anyone by their clothes and appearance, but by getting to know the person, and only after that to draw some conclusions about him. For her, the soul, behavior, and character were more important than mere rags, which would not reveal a rotten soul. The girl had no choice, because she had already agreed to dinner, and therefore she could only hope that she could get along with the guy, and he would be a very adequate young man who would treat her with respect. Otherwise, to build a relationship with him will be as difficult as possible. After all, the girl was used to independence and normal relations with her surroundings to mutual respect. In addition, she had a very high self-esteem. She evaluated herself and realized that she would not allow anyone to treat her as a servant, as one who owed something to someone. She is above it all, and would rather go to work to earn her own living than to grovel before someone, to tolerate disregard for her feelings and emotions. But only time would tell what her future husband would be like. Camille began to prepare for dinner several hours in advance. She wanted to make a positive impression on important people, and therefore she was responsible for the choice of outfit and image in general. It was decided to dress quite discreetly and laconically. Thus, elegantly classic black dress, curls, and minimal makeup looked perfect, although it added visual age to Camille. By the time she was just about to sit down and read a book, the doorbell rang. Voices were heard on the first floor. It became clear that it was the guests who had been invited to dinner. "Camille, we have guests coming downstairs." The father's voice came from downstairs. The girl looked at herself in the mirror once more, fixed her dress curls, and headed for the first floor. She felt a terrible excitement and worry about what her potential future husband would be like. After a few seconds of confusion, she headed to the first floor, where Emily was already telling the guests to come to the table. Camille stopped on the threshold to assess the situation. At the table sat her father, a grown, solid man who was his buddy, and a young guy who was staring intently in her direction. She made her way to the table, and the moment the girl was almost seated at the well, he said, "Honey, this seat is for your mother. Please sit down in the other empty seat. I would like her to sit next to me." Father smiled. The only free seat left was next to the boy. He still continued to stare at the girl, making her uncomfortable. But the moment she sat down next to him, John just shifted his already bored look to his father, making it clear that he wasn't very interested in this dinner. There was an immediate conversation between the fathers. The young men just sat silently. No one dared to start a conversation. "So you are still a little schoolgirl?" Suddenly the boy asked, without even turning toward Camille. "I thought you'd be older." "Yes," the girl replied. "I'm finishing my last year of high school this year. If it works out, I'll go to college. And if not, I can work." At that moment, John turned towards the girl and said, "A girl doesn't need an education to be a great housewife. Your mother should have taught you everything." School. Okay, to have something to talk to a girl about. It's worth finishing. And the rest is a man's prerogative. And I don't think girls should be allowed to go to university at all. If you can't find a normal husband, then work as a servant, and that's it. Don't get involved in men's professions. All this sounded quite aggressive, and even angry. Camille was silent for a couple of minutes, thinking about what she had just heard. After that, she answered to the guy, saying with confidence, "I do not think that a girl should not study. Education plays a huge role in everyone's life. And if there is an opportunity to get it, you should hold on to it. Otherwise, you could just be left with nothing and really only work as a servant." The girl was silent for a few seconds and then added, "What about marriage?" Well, if a girl is lucky enough to get married, and there is no need for additional sources of income in the family, if her husband fully provides and satisfies all her needs, then you cannot work and just do the house, keep cozy in order. But it happens that for one reason or another money is needed, and one husband cannot earn it in large quantities. And then the wife can also go to work, so that their joint life became much better. The girl finished her thought. After that, she was silent again. For a few minutes, the boy did not react to Camille's utterances, but just listened attentively to the conversation of the fathers, who were discussing business and further development in this or that direction. And only at the moment when the conversation of the parents came to the usual worldly questions, he again turned towards the girl and in no less rude and arrogant manner spoke. If a girl is not a fool, she will not marry a man who cannot provide for her and fulfill all her financial needs. And in case money is scarce, the husband should look for additional ways to earn money, but certainly not the wife. And if a girl starts working, she loses all her attractiveness and sexuality and just becomes a worn-out workhorse, living with whom is boring and unbearable. The guy looked at the girl, gauging her reaction and waiting for an answer. What about love? After all, not everything in this world is decided by money. It sounded in some way even childishly naive and stupid, but at the same time, the girl was completely sure that her position was correct. Can one live with a man without love? It would be a kind of violence against oneself. And besides, you'd have to spend an inordinate amount of time to get accustomed without love. I think it would be more violence to yourself than any relief in life. I'd rather work than live like that with someone I don't love. Love is something made up by sentimental poets. Nonsense. It doesn't exist. There is only the satisfaction of physical needs. And all these stories about the soul, about love, falling in love, affection, all this nonsense, replied the boy and turned away to his fathers. The conversation between the young men was definitely not going well. Despite the fact that the boy was outwardly attractive enough, kept his posture and looked decent, Camille did not like him at all, mostly because of his manner of speaking. She didn't agree with such a life position, and therefore she couldn't imagine how this guy was going to find a girlfriend and a future wife. Although, on the other hand, provided that love does not matter to him. And the most important thing is looks and fulfillment of physical needs. Special problems with finding a girl should not arise, especially he is ready to fully provide all her requests and desires. And therefore she can even not work and do not go to university. Such a future Camille clearly did not want for herself. She had goals and ambitions. She strived for education and development in the chosen direction. Therefore, life with such a man will definitely bring her disappointment. But there is a possibility that he will change. People change in the name of love and the person they love, or it's not him. And the guy really rejects all feelings. For the rest of the dinner, the guy and the girl never spoke again. Their life positions were completely opposite, and therefore there was simply no point in continuing the dialogue. In addition, John devoted a huge amount of time exactly to the dialogue of fathers, trying not to miss a single detail. It was obvious that the guy was much more interested in work and career advancement, options for developing his own business, than the potential development of a love relationship with Camille. Toward the end of the dinner, When the guests were about to leave, Christopher spoke after shaking hands. "Now we're expecting you for a return dinner. You'll get to meet my wife. She couldn't make it with us tonight. She had a bad day. But I'm sure she'll be glad to get to know your family a little better, especially since we plan to be in-laws soon." Emily didn't expect such a statement from her guests. Therefore, she expected a mixed reaction from Camille. But the girl stood completely, calmly restraining her emotions and not giving the impression that what she said had hurt or shocked her in any way. Not once at dinner had anything been said about John's future, and therefore the girl assumed that it was just an acquaintance, after which everything could still change. But judging by the behavior and utterances of the guy, he did not care about feelings. The main thing for him was to get a girl and his wife who will not work and study and will just follow all his whims. After the guests had left, the father turned to his daughter and said, "But what do you think, John? He's a smart guy who knows his business well enough to be serious and responsible. I'm sure you like him. How could a girl not like him?" His father says the crowds hang on him, but he thinks only about the future of the company and devotes all his free time to education and development in his chosen direction. That's great, isn't it? I think you two get along great and will make a great married couple where you will have quite a bearable relationship. My father smiled as he looked at Camille, who was listening attentively without showing any emotion in response to his words. It seemed to me that he was just a sensual robot who was only looking for his own benefit and wanted to be in charge of the family, to make all the decisions himself and completely limit his wife's will. He said that the girl should not study and work, that her place at home is as a servant, and that's all there is to it. And the man should already earn and independently solve all arising issues. "Is this normal for a family relationship?" she asked, looking intently at her father. Emily, all this time, just stood and listened attentively to her husband and daughter. She couldn't believe that she was always so emotional and testy. Camille calmly talking about a potential marriage to a man she was seeing for the first time in her life. That she wasn't in front of the reading, but just calmly voicing her opinion, backing it all up with arguments and reasoning is unquestionable. The woman did not know whether to add something in this situation, on whose side it is better to stand. So she just kept quiet. "But you know, there are different families." The father shrugged indifferently, making it clear that this situation is as calm as possible. The guy just has such a worldview that he wants to completely relieve his future wife of all worries and troubles and fully provide for her. This is the dream of almost every girl. So I honestly don't understand what exactly you're unhappy with. You won't have to spend a few more years on your education. You'll never have to work and scrape pennies for bread. You won't need anything. It's a great marriage that will make your life just perfect. The father looked reproachfully at his daughter, who was still standing calmly in front of him, waiting patiently for the answer to his question. "I believe that such a marriage can bring nothing but indifference and disappointment in love," replied Camille. "A husband should be chosen so that you want to spend every minute of your life with him, not so that you can hope that he will stay at work late at night again." Stephen was silent for a few moments. It was evident that the man was thinking over what he had said, that he had some doubts. But afterward he said indifferently, "You can get used to any man, and if you want it badly enough, not just affection, but love will appear. And the other person can be convinced of this too, if you put enough time and effort into solving the problem and misunderstandings. Marriage isn't always about love. Sometimes it's just cold calculation. And sometimes people only after some time in the role of husband and wife realize how dear they are to each other and how much in love with each other. It's not for nothing that they say that from love to hate is one step. So you can take it backwards and just love a person who at first glance seems just hateful." The man shifted his eyes to his wife, perhaps expecting some support. But the woman didn't utter a word, just lowered her eyes and remained silent to everything he said. He looked at his daughter again. Camille pondered over everything her father had said. On the one hand, she hoped that love could indeed appear in the most unexpected ways, and she believed that a person could change a great deal. But on the other hand, she realized that this was very, very rare. She looked up at her father for a few minutes and said indifferently, "Love can appear in a week, in a year, and in 10 years. But how can you live with a man until it appears, especially to be his wife? If he will not respect and appreciate you, if you will be just a servant for him, is it worth to regard such relations as high and sincere? Or is it just a mutual satisfaction of needs, which may not suit one of the parties?" Camille crossed her arms on her chest, making it clear that she was not going to accept her father's position and would stand her ground to the last. Sometimes you can be patient for the good of yourself and others. This conversation is over. I advise you to think about what you can occupy yourself with until love appears. What can you focus your attention on so that you don't have to think about such nonsense? You're just too naive for this cruel adult world. You don't realize how complicated life can be, and how much effort you have to put in to get even the slightest chance of getting a good job. Someday you will realize that everything you do is for the good, and that every decision you made was right and led to positive results. After saying this, Stephen headed for the kitchen, and only the daughter's mother remained in the hallway. They stood in silence. No one started a dialogue. "Do you think so too?" Suddenly, Camille asked her mother. "Of course not, my dear," the woman said, clearly not expecting such a question from her daughter. "But on the other hand, love does come quite unexpectedly. Try to just give the relationship a chance, and maybe you'll do just fine." The mother lowered her eyes, clearly feeling guilty for accepting her husband's position, even though she strongly disagreed with it. "And if love doesn't come, what can you do? Then something will have to be done. In our time with this, all became easier. Now you can just divorce without much trouble and judgment of society, and then you can start building your life completely differently. Mom, you realize that love doesn't matter to this guy. He himself personally said that it doesn't exist, and that the only thing a woman does is stay at home. And if I want to develop, if I want to study or somehow realize myself in life, then what? No one can forbid you anything." "Honey," Emily replied, "you are a completely free person who can decide for herself what to do and how to do it. Do you want to study or work, or just sit at home and enjoy the privacy and silence? And you can also completely change your life at any time to leave that person you don't love. Give up a job you hate, drop out of university in any course, just because you are disappointed in your chosen direction. Remember that you are a completely free person, and no one should limit your life. But sometimes you have to think about the consequences of your decisions. They could be disastrous." The woman lowered her head. "I have to go and clean the table and water the flowers on the second floor." Emily went about her business, and Camille was left standing all alone. What am I going to do? The main question that tormented her to the point of madness. She did not understand how to act, what decision to make in favor of her own happiness and future, or in favor of the happiness and well-being of everyone else. Any decision will affect not only her, but also her surroundings. Therefore, it must be made in a balanced and responsible manner. Meanwhile, John and Christopher, who were on their way home, were also discussing the dinner they had just finished. And what do you think of their daughter?" the man asked his son. "I think she's just another naive girl who doesn't realize how complicated and unfair life can be. She tried to tell me throughout the evening about love, about light, pure feelings, about how important it all is, just some childish babble." The guy rolled his eyes and pointedly poked, making it clear that such behavior does not suit him at all. He wants to see as his wife a girl who will perfectly understand and accept all his aspirations and desires, who will put the maximum amount of effort to maintain home comfort, to be an ideal wife, and remain as beautiful over the years. Moreover, the guy was not even thinking about marriage. In the near future, he was going to develop exclusively in the professional direction. About the need to get married, stated already directly by his father. Christopher knew about the fact that his father, Camille, certainly had a burgeoning business, after which there was a considerable amount of production facilities. He wanted to get them into his ownership and completely remodel them to maximize the profitability of his business. However, he couldn't say it directly, not until the most favorable conditions were present. Similarly, Camille's father did not tell anyone but his wife about his desire to get a part of the business, so as not to make a fuss or alarm anyone with his decision. Both men believed that after family unification, it would be very successful to improve their position and get an opportunity for a new impetus for development and self-realization. After all, it is much more difficult to refuse relatives, especially considering that it is not accepted in society. "But you know, she is still quite small," spoke Christopher, "which means that it will be possible to bring her up completely under your needs and preferences, and as a result, you will have a wife, a behavior and character that is completely in line with your preferences. Of course, you will have to spend some time and effort to get an excellent result, but the effort is definitely worth it." "And here you are right," John replied and smiled wryly. "It remains only to understand how to re-educate her and make her a docile wife who will sit at home and wait for me like a faithful dog. I don't want anything else. All these high relationships are definitely not for me. The only thing I want is to develop our company and earn so much that I don't even have to look at the price tags in the stores and immediately buy everything I want." A guy turned to the window, looking at the passing neighborhood. "That's exactly the main job. You will still have time to fall in love. There will be money. There will be love and more than one. Trust my experience. All that's left is to get you married as soon as possible and move on to discussing issues that have to do with our business plan. And then everything will be just fine. And we'll deal with Camille later if she can't be rehabilitated. She won't play such an important role in your life," Christopher said. Then he grinned at how much of a responsibility ordinary girls sometimes took on, who, in fact, had no value at all. An ordinary girl can act like she's more important than everyone around her, as if everyone should reckon with her opinion and respect her every word, but while hard on her not forever. "We'll do the wedding and then do whatever you want. It's a deal." The father looked toward his son. "All right, but if there's a lot of smartassery, I won't be quiet either." Soon it was planned to attend a dinner to which Stephen and his family were invited. The man had already started to think over the concept of the wedding, to consider possible variants of events, to discuss all the issues with his wife. Emily was extremely reluctant to discuss all the moments, realizing that this decision could simply break their daughter's life. But she did not argue with her husband and agreed with everything he suggests and says. This time, Camille decided to dress more brightly and defiantly make a full evening makeup and put all her hair in a tight bundle. Her choice fell on a red dress, which immediately caught the eye and attracted a lot of attention. Such an image in no way corresponded to John's idea of an ideal wife who should sit at home and obey her husband. It was with such a bright and defiant style. She wanted to push the guy away from herself by showing her independence, but she didn't know about his family's plan, that she was to be his wife anyway, that her behavior and appearance were unlikely to influence the decision. The dinner was to be at 6 o'clock, but suddenly Christopher called his companion and postponed the meeting for a couple of hours, citing business. In fact, his son was just late after another quick date, which he often went on, and it would be wrong to start dinner without him. After all, the plan was to discuss the future of John July. The evening began exactly the same way as last time. A certain seating of the guests and a competently set table, outfits, and costumes stood out strongly. Only Camille, who looked bright and defiant and definitely attracted a lot of attention. Of course, she had counted on just such an effect. Counted on the disapproval of her potential fiancé's family. But instead, Christopher complimented her, and John simply smiled as he met her with an appraising six-eyed glance over her body. It turns out that the change in style didn't help at all. The guy is attracted not only reserved and quiet girls, but also sexy and lecherous. Moreover, John liked Camille's image much more than at their first meeting. After all, now he saw at least some advantage in making their union. He realized that she had a very interesting style and that it could be left for going out with her to friends or to public places. Going out together would still be necessary so no one would suspect anything, and he didn't want to be everywhere with a girl who looked more like a nun. It turns out that the girl's actions only fueled the guy's interest and made him more determined, which did not play into her hands. After a while, lively conversations at the table began. The parents were talking among themselves, and the guy and the girl just sat and silently listened to numerous stories and plans for the future, exactly until the talk was about their future and their upcoming marriage. So asked Evelyn, who was John's mother, "When do we plan to play the wedding?" She was clearly happy with this arrangement and wanted to have the celebration as early as possible. But when Camille turns 18, Emily replied, "How can we have a wedding when we have a legal age requirement for each spouse? Our daughter hasn't reached that age yet, so we will have to wait a little for that day." There was complete silence at the table. Everyone understood that the woman was right in her decisions, but certainly no one planned to wait 2 years. The only one who was happy about this was Camille. After all, for such a long period of time it would be possible to understand without problems whether there was love between them and a chance for its development or not. And then Christopher's voice suddenly sounded. "But why put off the wedding ceremony for so long? It's an eternity. There are workarounds for every law, and those are the ones we're going to use." He smiled and looked in the direction of Camille's father. "But the only reason to get married early is pregnancy," Emily said, shocked at the thought of her daughter having to become a mom at such an early age. "I don't agree." Camille stood up sharply at the table, making it clear that she was not happy with this arrangement. "I'm not going to be a mom at 16. I don't want to get pregnant by a guy I don't even know." She felt a tug on her arm to sit up. It was John who had made the decision to make Camille calm down and shut up, so that the situation could be discussed further. "I'm not going to become a father at such an early age either. I have a career to think about, not diapers and diapers." After all, Camille's mother and the girl herself breathed a sigh of relief. Camille was genuinely glad that her potential husband at least has an understanding of the situation and realizes that everything in life is not so simple. But right after she thought about it, the guy added, "We're just doing a pregnancy certificate, and then we can just and quickly get married and not have to do any baby, and then just as easily go and do a certificate that she had a miscarriage. That's it. That's how we're gonna do it. And we don't have to explain anything to anyone." John said it as calmly as possible, without showing any emotion. But the girl was extremely indignant at what she heard. Of course, such news will spread throughout the neighborhood as quickly as possible, and they will go not the best reputation, which would not be desirable. In addition, it can negatively affect the possibility of enrollment in the university. After all, there is a risk that information about early pregnancy will reach the commission at admission, and in this case, you will have to try by all rights and wrongs to cleanse your honor and dignity. "That's not a good option," Camille said. "I won't be able to go to university, and my fame would spread at the speed of light. I don't want that to happen. Don't ruin my life and deprive me of opportunities just because of your wishes." The father looked menacingly at his daughter, then with a smile on his face said, "She is so fiery often, but she quickly withdraws," he said and looked at his daughter again. "Let's not postpone the wedding celebration for long. Let's have it as soon as possible. You won't have to study after you get the certificate," John said confidently. Looking at the girl, "All you need is to clean and cook at home and keep yourself in order. You don't need an education for that. Besides, we'll need a real baby soon to strengthen our union. And in that case, you just won't have time for a stupid education that won't be useful in life. You should be reading books on how to take care of a baby, to make a normal mother out of you." He indifferently continued to eat, despite the silence at the table. Everyone was completely shocked by what they heard. It is clear that the wedding was planned and discussed on both sides, but the child's such a development was definitely not part of the plans. Although the guy has long ago decided that in order for the union to be strong and long, in any case will have to become a father, despite the fact that he does not want it. So it will be possible to strengthen the union between families and reduce the likelihood of disagreements in business. After all, it is simple to divide it and continue to live as before. When taking into account the presence of a grandson or granddaughter will be extremely difficult. Of course, the child was planned not immediately after the wedding, but soon, in order to eliminate all possible risks. This news he previously wanted to discuss with his father to weigh the pros and cons. But as a result, since there was such a situation at the table, he decided to inform everyone about his decision at once. He had thought it over several times, and he was completely sure that it was the most correct in the current situation, and no one would oppose his decision. For the rest of the evening, the atmosphere was as tense as possible. No one dared to start talking about the baby, and Camille remained silent the whole time. Clearly shocked by all that she had heard, she had almost agreed to become John's wife in order to improve her family's situation and solve some financial issues. But to become a mother and to make a child with a man whom she did not like, but even rather disliked, she was not ready. That's why such news shocked her. Camille's parents were also in a stupor. Father, of course, wanted to improve his welfare and get the opportunity to manage part of the business, but not to become a grandfather. And Emily thought only about the fact that after the birth of the child, her daughter would have minimal opportunities to develop and study. It would be harder to find a decent man and go back to the life she had before marriage. Despite the fact that the dinner was intended to discuss a future wedding, the matter was never resolved. It was soon decided to split up and discuss things a little later, in a couple of days. No sooner had Camille entered her room on her return home than she heard her mother's exclamation of displeasure. It was addressed to her father. "What child? She's a child. You realize she can't drop everything and just give birth to a baby, to a strange guy, so we can live in peace. I can't forgive myself for that." The woman was clearly angry at the situation and did not understand what to do, how to influence her husband and his decision to play a wedding that would ruin the life of their common daughter. "I didn't know about any children," Stephen replied. "In fact, I'm just as outraged as you are. I'll make up my mind. There will be no child. This is just out of line. You should be thinking about work, not about how to make babies as fast as possible." And he seemed like such a reasonable guy to me. The man sighed, and then he spoke. "We'll meet again in a couple of days and discuss everything. I'm sure that everything will be decided in our favor, and no children will be out of the question in the next few years. It's just absurd." After the last sentence, Camille closed the door. Anxiously, she exhaled. She was glad that at least in this matter her parents were completely on her side. It turns out that no one will force her to give birth to a child. And in any case, she will enter the university regardless of whether her future husband wants it or not. She is not going to give up her dream, and therefore will definitely put the maximum amount of effort to stand on her own and achieve her goals. But now, the main thing is to solve the issue of the wedding as soon as possible, so that it is possible to get a divorce as soon as possible in the future. Yes, the girl did not plan to fall in love with a young man and try to change him under herself. She just wanted to improve the state of her family, to give her father the opportunity to restore the former business, after which she will be able to leave the guy with peace of mind and start living in her own pleasure. For that reason alone, she didn't try to find options to postpone the celebration. She just wanted to do everything with minimal damage to herself, so as not to harm her future and stay with a good reputation. A few days later, it was decided to reconvene with the families to revisit the issue of discussing the wedding ceremony. The first to put forward a proposal was John's father. "Regarding the date of the wedding, I suggest we organize everything next month. There will be a free window of time to prepare for everything and have the best ceremony possible. I think that we should not be in a hurry, so that our children will remember this day for a lifetime, so that there will be no unpleasant rumors, and certainly not a bad reputation about families. Christopher looked carefully at his wife, who agreed, nodding at everything that was said. The woman in general was not much of a talker. In meetings, she rarely voiced her opinion and always simply agreed with what her husband said. One would have thought that she simply had no say in the family. Actually, that's what Camille thought, and was worried that after the wedding, she would also have to sit silently and just nod. "I think it's too late," the boy muttered. "We can have everything fully organized in just a couple of weeks. I don't see any point in delaying the celebration. All the more so, everyone realizes that the wedding is for business purposes only, so there is no point in waiting for love and affection to appear. They can appear in a year or two, and we just don't have that much time. Besides, when we start together, it will be much easier to get used to each other, and therefore the relationship will develop much better and faster." The guy looked in the direction of Camille, who was clearly loaded with numerous thoughts. "I think it's too fast," Emily replied. "We just can't get ready for the wedding in such a short period of time. Not only do we have to find dresses and various attributes, but we have to coordinate everything." She did not have time to finish, because Camille intervened in the conversation and said confidently, "We can do everything in a couple of weeks. That's why I agree with John. We should do it as soon as possible. Otherwise, it could take a long time. We don't want to put off the preparations. Let's start making the guest list now, and tomorrow we will prepare for the ceremony itself, decide all the organizational issues and so on." To say that everyone was surprised by the girl's answer is an understatement. No one expected such behavior from Camille, who just a couple of days ago completely rejected the idea of marriage until the age of 18, so as not to spoil her reputation. And now she agrees to any conditions, so also takes the initiative to spend everything in the minimum time. John was pleased with such behavior on the part of the girl. He thought about the fact that she began to change under his influence, that she accepted her position, and now will constantly agree with him. He didn't even think about the fact that she could pursue her own goals and aspirations, that she could do it all just based on her own interest and preferences. But all in all, it didn't matter much to him. The main thing is to quickly organize the wedding, and then begin the process of her upbringing under himself. John did not even doubt that he could without much trouble to break and completely change the girl's behavior to suit his needs. Preparations for the wedding took place as quickly as possible. Invitations were sent out, and literally the next day after the ceremony was discussed, and in a few days the room was already being prepared and outfits for the bride and groom were chosen. All the bills were paid by the groom's side, so Camille decided not to deny herself anything. She chose the best outfits, included in the menu very interesting and not cheap items, insisted on decorating the hall with fresh flowers and so on. The girl decided to organize everything as much as possible under her taste, so that this event brought her some joy, albeit fleeting. Despite the huge expenditures, Christopher did not refuse anything in the organization of the celebration, and did not show anyone his dissatisfaction with the situation. Camille's parents did not even try to stop her or change her mind about this or that decision. After all, she immediately made it clear that everything will be either the way she wants or nothing. Everything was ready by the day of the registration. The result exceeded all expectations. It seemed that the wedding was planned for months. There was a thorough preparation on all issues, and a considerable amount of time was given to each element of decorative design of the hall and restaurant. Everything was combined and perfectly harmonized. John's side invited a lot of guests. Camille decided to invite a minimum number of people so as not to provoke gossip, although of course they will appear in any case. After all, everyone invited perfectly understood that the wedding will be held only because of the interesting position of the bride. After all, there were no other options for its organization. The celebration was quite noisy and fun. Camille Otreveazia, full on this holiday, in anything did not deny herself and behaved not in the best way, especially considering that according to legend she was pregnant. To suspect that the wedding ceremony was not real, it was as difficult as possible. The only thing that caused some whispers was the kisses of the bride and groom, which were quick and cliffy. It was as if the young people were just uncomfortable kissing each other. But it was all blamed on the bride's shyness and her pregnancy hormones. After the end of the marriage ceremony, the young people went to the apartment that belonged to John and now became their home. It remained only to come to terms with the new situation, settle in a new place, and wait for the improvement of the state of their family, after which Camille will be able to return to normal life. But everything turned out to be not as simple as she wanted. Soon after the wedding ceremony, the girl learned that Christopher refused to formalize her father's vows. Consequently, the opportunity to become a manager Stephen simply did not have. However, another development was proposed. It was decided that the man would be hired as a manager to oversee work processes, but only on the condition that a general power of attorney was granted for his business in the name of John's father. This was necessary in order to begin restoring the facility and refurbishing it in a different direction. This was the only way to get production back up and running. Another nuance was that once the company was rebuilt, Stephen Christopher would be entitled to a portion of the income that would go to him for the rest of the company's life. The arrangement turned out to be completely different from what the girl's family expected, and therefore had to urgently think about what to do and how to act to give her father the opportunity to rehabilitate. After a few days, Camille still made a difficult decision for herself. She is staying with John until her father is able to continue running his business on his own. Yes, he will have to give a portion of the profits to Christopher, but he will also be able to provide for himself and his mother. And that's the whole point of this plan. All that's left is to wait for this change to happen. Immediately after the wedding, the guy began to make efforts to bend the girl under himself and change her character and behavior. But Camille was not going to give up so easily and turn into a doll, which could be easily controlled at the slightest desire. She continued to show her character and that she was not going to obey anyone and change for anyone. In this way, several months passed. Quarrels were in the Yum family all the time. The guy and the girl just did not find common ground because they had completely different goals in life, different views on the proper position of the family, the duties of men and women, the rights of me, rights and opportunities, but no one talked about divorce. After all, everyone understood perfectly well that the set goals have not yet been achieved, and therefore divorce was not an option. Moreover, John was still completely sure that Camille was not going anywhere from him now, just like her family. That she will fully fulfill all the wishes of the guy, will obey him, and in the end, will become an ideal wife in his understanding. The girl successfully passed all school exams and received a certificate. Without hesitation, she went to the university and applied for admission in the direction of a chef. She realized that her independent decision could be the cause of another quarrel with her newly married husband. But that was of little concern to her. Camille thought only about her own future and well-being, completely disregarding all the guy's past statements about education, girls, and their jobs. She understood perfectly well that she just needed to get a higher education so that in the future she wouldn't have to worry about finding a job that would allow her to fully satisfy all her natural needs. Camille returned home in a great mood. After submitting her documents, she met a friend and spent a few hours with her in a cafe. This arrangement did not suit her husband, and every time after such situations at home, she was expected another lecture that normal wives sit at home and wait for their husbands from work. They hang out in cafes and parks with their girlfriends all day long. But today she was waiting for another conversation, even more unpleasant and complicated. Immediately after the girl returned home, she saw John, who stood in the hallway with the most displeased expression on his face. "I do not think that your next moralizing will lead to a positive outcome," Camille said from the doorstep, not even listening to the guy. "What you're telling me doesn't matter, because I'm not going to give up my friends. I'm still going to hang out with them. I'm still going to spend time with them. So get used to it, sweetie," the girl muttered. She was about to go into the room when the guy stopped her abruptly, grabbing her arm. The grip was strong enough that Camille even shrieked and tried to pull her hand out, but to no avail. and we'll talk about your girlfriends later. There are more serious things to talk about right now, John said. Then, with a sharp movement, he turned his wife to face him, so that she was as close as possible. I don't remember that I allowed you to apply to the university. The girl was extremely surprised that her newfound husband already knew about it. She hadn't shared this moment with anyone in particular, but most likely his family just had too many acquaintances who liked to discuss everything that just got in the way. The matter of her admission had apparently been discussed as well. Camille thought for a few moments about what exactly to say to the boy. Then she spoke angrily. No one asked you. I make my own decisions about my life, and I'm certainly not going to discuss them with someone who doesn't respect my opinion. If I said I'm going to go to university, then I'm going to do it, and no amount of excuses will work on me. She gave her hand another tug, but it had no positive effect. The grip didn't loosen. It even seemed to have gotten stronger, so much so that the bone at Camille and surrendered a strange creak. It hurt. Let me go, the girl said loudly. The bruise will remain for the whole arm. And if you break it, what will you do? Then maybe you'll become more difficult, since you don't understand Russian. As if the guy hissed through his teeth. Then he added, I'm telling you for the last time that you will not enter anywhere, and therefore I advise you to come to your senses, or am I gonna make you do it? You're acting like a little kid. You should be thinking about your family instead of your own. You're not just a girl now, you're a wife. You have to fulfill all your duties to the fullest. I'm doing mine. We don't need any money. Neither does your family, whose father is incapable of anything, if he can't provide for his wife on his own. So stop it, and think about your behavior. The guy let go of Camille's hand and headed for the kitchen to finish the coffee he'd left behind. He didn't want her to go to school, to get an education or develop in any way. It was always compared to his mother, who had given up everything and married Christopher, and had never known any need for anything in her life. Her father provided for her completely and covered all her expenses, and so she could live simply for her own pleasure. And the secret of their happiness lies in the fact that Evelyn never argued with her husband and always listened to his opinion. At least, John was sure of that. He made efforts day after day to re-educate Camille and make her like her mother, but it didn't work very well. In turn, Camille was well aware that Evelyn's life was far from the best. After all, she had no opinions of her own. She could not afford to fully socialize with other people, and even leave the house without her husband's permission. A woman always asked permission before buying something or doing something, never allowed her feelings to come out, and seemed disconnected from the world. Such a young, ambitious, and purposeful girl was certainly not going to become. Therefore, all the stories about the happy life of her husband's parents, she simply passed by her ears. Despite the conflict that had just occurred, Camille did not plan to refuse to enter the university. Moreover, she went to prepare for the entrance exams, which were to be held from one day to the next. There was a lot to learn, so she was glad that John would be at work all day, and she would be able to enjoy the quiet and immerse herself in studying. The next few days were particularly noisy and anxious. The couple were constantly squabbling regarding the girl's admission to university. Every night, John became more and more aggressive and rude, and even swung at Camille a couple of times, but never touched her. However, this did not help him to achieve the desired result, and his wife successfully passed all the entrance tests. The only thing left to do was to come back in a week and sign the admission papers. And from September, she would start studying in her chosen field. She had no doubt that by the time she returned home, her hubby would already know about her success, so she could enjoy her success and his defeat in his attempts to thwart her enrollment. But this evening, the girl will definitely remember for the rest of her life. After all, it was he who had a huge impact on her future fate. She wasn't even surprised to see John right after she opened the door. The guy looked particularly angry and excited. And in such a situation, the girl's feelings were mixed. On the one hand, she realized that she made her own decisions, and was responsible for all the consequences, that she had every right to manage her life on her own. But on the other hand, every time she saw a guy in such a state, she could not even imagine what to expect from him. And that's why every time a feeling of fear came up that she couldn't control her neighbors, she didn't know. And therefore the opportunity to seek help in case of anything she had no. She had to solve all conflict situations on her own and only hope that she would not have to call the police or lie in the hospital after another trial. And this evening, the girl was not just worried. What the hell are you doing? From the doorstep, the guy started yelling. Before the girl could even close the door, I told you that you would stay home and be a model wife. Why the hell did you go to university to take exams? Do you think with your head, who'd want you like that? You want to cook. You're welcome. The kitchen is all yours. That's where you belong. The guy grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her into the kitchen, then shoved her in and stood in the aisle. You're the smartest one there. That's where you belong. And don't you dare cross your husband anywhere else. You make me the laughing stock of my friends. How dare you act like that? Didn't your parents teach you any sense at all? Then I will. The girl didn't have time to get a word in edgewise. She just watched him get angrier and more aggressive with every word he said. She watched his pupils change and his fists clench. This had never happened before. And so she felt an unprecedented fear. She felt that there was a very serious threat to her life, which she would not be able to cope with on her own. The most correct decision she made was just to keep silent and wait for the end of the guy's monologue, after which he should calm down. But that wasn't happening. He waited a few minutes, with all the hatred and anger, looking at his wife, after which he continued to speak in the same aggressive and angry manner. Why did we stop talking? Hearing suddenly activated, or brains appeared. Usually you can't shut up. She speaks her mind. Look at her every time. It's over. Her own opinion, what you'll always do now. Is that what you're supposed to do now? Yes, to behave normally and know your place in the house. So that's how it's always gonna be from now on. The guy grabbed the girl by the arm and dragged her to the opposite side of the house. Let's go. I'll show you another one of your places where you should be spending your time instead of hanging around parks and universities. He dragged her into the bathroom. Even though her clothes were always clean and laid out, Camille was well aware of the urgency to do something to keep herself safe. There weren't too many options, and so the moment John dragged her past the front door, she just jerked her arm sharply. Then, without looking back, she ran in an unknown direction. She could hear the guy yelling something back at her. But any stop, any confusion could cause very dire consequences. She ran for a few minutes until she realized that no one was running after her, and that she could breathe out and catch her breath. Camille looked around. The place was completely unfamiliar to her. She didn't understand which direction to go to get to any familiar house where she could feel safe. Her phone had been left at home in her purse, which had been successfully placed by the front door. She didn't even think to grab it as she ran out of the house. All thoughts were only about running away as soon as possible to feel completely safe, to get rid of the potential threat. For over an hour, the girl walked around the neighborhood, trying to figure out exactly where she was. During this time, it had gone completely dark, and it became much more difficult to navigate. Soon she was completely exhausted and had no idea what to do in the situation. The only option was to wait until morning, but she couldn't just go to sleep on the bench. That way she could be found without a problem. Husband, when he will get to work in the morning. This option seemed to the girl the most delusional, and therefore it was decided to look for a place where it would be completely safe to spend at least one night, and then decide what to do next. To find a decent option was not possible. Soon there was no strength at all, and therefore had to go down into the cold basement of an abandoned house, which looked absolutely terrible and even dangerous. But there was no choice. In the basement, the girl saw an old mattress, which was shot with something like a light blanket. She was surprised and frightened at the same time. After all, If a full-fledged sleeping place was organized here, it was very likely that at any moment the tenant of these apartments could come, and then the situation could become much worse. But there was no strength to look for a new temporary shelter. So Camille decided to try her luck. Sleeping in the cold basement was not easy. Not only that the temperature around did not allow to fully relax and felt a strong dampness, the girl still could not calm down after everything that had happened and did not understand what she should do next. Her father had not yet had time to fully restore the business. Yes, and the idea with the wedding did not bring the expected result. And to get a part of the company as a gift for such a momentous occasion did not work out. Yes, Christopher had put a lot of effort into remodeling her father's old company and starting a new production facility, but he did it mostly for his own benefit. After all, part of the profit will come to him in any case after all the work processes are set up. So there's no need for marriage. Or is there? And as soon as Camille went to file for divorce, her father would be left with nothing again, and their family would be on the brink of poverty. Anxious thoughts were weighing on the girl and made her feel the heightened anxiety of the experience. She did not understand what decision would be the most correct. Is it worth it to continue to tolerate such an attitude in his address? Or is it time to get rid of the man who brings only negativity into her life? How to apply and where to go after the divorce? Will John not do something to her or her loved ones in the event that she makes such a decision? After all, as time has shown, the guy is completely insane and obsessed solely on himself and ego. It turns out that the decision may provoke him, and then the consequences will be completely unpredictable. And maybe it's just worth going to his parents and try to talk about everything that happened. It's unlikely that his father would approve of this attitude towards women. But on the other hand, it is completely unclear how exactly he influenced his own wife to become so malleable and agreeable to everything. Maybe she wasn't like that. So one should go to her parents and tell them everything. They would definitely be on her side and wouldn't allow her to be treated like this. But her father had married her off to a man she didn't love. Maybe he would just force her to go back to him to continue rebuilding his company. With such quiet thoughts interrupting each other, Camille did not notice how she fell asleep. The sleep was shallow and very disturbing. She woke up literally from every rustle. So when she heard footsteps early in the morning and jumped up, feeling how hard her heart was beating, she expected to see anyone, a man of no fixed abode or her husband, but not her. A little girl of about 5 or 6 years old was slowly descending into the basement. She took her steps as carefully as possible so as not to trip and fall among the debris of old wood and destroyed parts of the house. Suddenly she looked up and saw Camille, who was sitting on the mattress and looking with bated breath at the little girl who was coming downstairs. There was an awkward silence, which was interrupted by the little girl. "Hi, I'm Jenna. Don't you have anywhere else to hang out during the day?" asked the girl and continued downstairs, slowly approaching the girl. To say that the picture shocked Camille was nothing to say. She just didn't know how to react to the appearance of a child in this place. Didn't understand what she was even doing here or how she was being led off by her parents alone. The girl looked tidy enough. It was obvious that she didn't live on the streets. She talked well and was neatly forbidden. Yet she went down into the basement of the abandoned house, completely alone, not scared of a stranger in the place. The girl walked over to Camille and sat down next to her on the mattress. She started to look at the toy she had brought with her, then turned around and pulled out another one, which was lying right behind the mattress. How could Camille not notice a child's toy in such a gloomy place? "Baby, what are you doing here? All alone? Or did you come here with your parents?" the girl asked, staring at Jenna. "No, I came here by myself," she answered. "I come here often during the day to play. Sometimes I even sleep at night." The little girl, without much interest in the conversation, began to play with her toys, while making the characteristic funny noises. She did not look in Camille's direction. Camille looked at the little girl who was sitting next to her. "Aren't you scared to sleep here alone? And why don't you sleep at home? Do you have parents Or are you an orphan? After the last question, the girl felt that it might sound too harsh and hurt the child. But Jenna's reaction said otherwise. It was scary at first, but now it's not scary anymore. I'm used to it. Sometimes Rex comes to me at night. He's my dog that my mom lets out when I sleep here. He doesn't scare me at all. And when I sleep alone, I just play before I go to sleep. And then I'm not scared either. Tonight I will sleep here, so I took my favorite toy with me. The girl held out a small doll with blue hair for Camille to look at. How come Mommy let you come here alone? Aren't you supposed to sleep at home? I can't sleep at home. When Uncle comes to visit, said the girl in a completely calm voice. When Uncle comes only in the afternoon, I play here, and then I go home in the evening. And then I sleep with my mother. And when my uncle stays with us at night, I can't stay there because he doesn't know about me yet. My mom really wants to marry my uncle, but if he finds out about me, he'll leave, like all uncles used to do. So she and I agreed that she will tell my uncle about me after the wedding. In the meantime, we'll play spies, and I'll hide from my uncle so he won't find out about me before time. And then we'll be fine, and I'll have a daddy. I even like playing like that. I'm helping my mom to be happy. The girl said all this with sincere joy. She believed that her mom would really get married soon and tell about the baby. But Camille had little faith in this. She couldn't believe that such a thing could happen, that a small child could spend the night all alone in an abandoned house, spend almost every day of her life here without going to daycare, and yet her mother reacts calmly to all this. Moreover, she herself sends the girl to this place, knowing perfectly well how dangerous it can be for a child. Camille looked at the girl who was indifferently playing with her dolls for a few more minutes. She was engrossed only in them, and she did not care at all that she was in the basement of an old house, that her mother was abandoning her for a strange man. And at this moment, the girl realized that the only one who really has no choice, who cannot change her life on her own and make balanced and responsible decisions. This is a little girl who involuntarily has to lose her childhood, happy moments, and grow up with serious psychological traumas. And she is an adult and independent person, can change her life without much trouble, can give up everything that does not suit her. And she can also save a little person who does not yet understand the seriousness of her problems and cannot do anything on her own. Do you want to? Stay with me while your mom marries your uncle, and then you'll definitely come back to her. We'll play and watch cartoons together, and we'll buy you a new doll that you won't be afraid to sleep with. Would you like that, Camille? She hoped for a positive answer and tried to make sure that the girl did not guess anything and just accepted her invitation to live together. Jenna hesitated for a few seconds. Then she nodded her head and gave her hand to Camille. The only thing she mouthed was, "You just need to tell my mom I'll be at your place, so she knows where to pick me up from later when she marries my uncle." And I'll tell her myself. All right. 'Cause we're in a big hurry right now. Yes, all right. Just don't forget to tell her not to worry about me. Otherwise she'll worry that I'm gone for so long. The girl sincerely believed that her mother was really worried about her and would definitely take her back after she had settled her own family life. Camille did not believe that and was determined to get custody of the little girl in order to give her a better future. The first thing she did was go to the juvenile detention center. She described the whole situation, except that the girl was sent to the basement by her own mother. Camille simply told about the fact that she met a homeless girl with no papers or anything else, which she did, and said that she was living in the basement of an abandoned house and that she didn't know anything about her parents, only that her mom would take her away after she married some uncle. The story was very convincing. Despite the fact that the girl did not have her own home and stable job, she was promised custody of the girl, but only if she provided all the conditions for the child to live. Camille was warned about inspections and that at any moment she could be deprived of the guardianship status if the child's living arrangements did not meet all the requirements. Little Jenna stayed at the center until the evening, while Camille went to deal with the many problems that had accumulated in her own life. The first thing she did was to pick up her papers from the university. After all, she was going to work to provide for her baby girl, and so there was no opportunity to get a full-fledged education. In the future, if the opportunity arises, she will definitely go to courses in her chosen specialty. But for now, she should think not about herself, but about another little person who could not solve her problems on her own. After that, she went to the registry office and filed an application for the dissolution of the marriage. She refused to be present during the call of her almost ex-husband, and therefore immediately went to her parents to tell about everything that had happened, and that soon there would be an addition to their family. Camille was worried that her father might get angry because of the situation. But surprisingly, the conversation was as calm as possible. Moreover, the man supported his daughter in the decisions made and promised to help in the upbringing of the little girl. Emily agreed to study with little Jenna and take her to kindergarten to look after her while her daughter would be at work. Camille was genuinely pleased with this response. Tears even came to her eyes, which she quickly waved away and headed off to pick up the baby girl. By the end of the day, all the paperwork was done. Of course, not without the financial support of the organization. But it was not so important for Camille. The most important thing was that she had made not only an important decision in her life, but also in Jenna's life, who would now grow up in a loving family that would treat her as a relative, not as a thing that could be gotten rid of at any moment. Despite Camille's misgivings, John signed the dissolution of marriage document without a court hearing. He never even once went to her home to address the situation and apologize. After receiving the document dissolving their union, Camille's life became much easier and more peaceful. She realized that now she could do whatever she wanted. She could go home without worrying about her own safety. Of course, her desired education had to be postponed, but that was not the cause of anxiety and worry. A few days after the girl took the documents, she was offered to simply transfer to the correspondence basis, and she gladly agreed. It didn't come true. And so did another of the girl's fears. Christopher continued to work successfully with her father, pretending that there was simply no conflict between his son and Camille. Moreover, John continued to treat Stephen with the same respect and showed due respect as a manager and always considered his opinion. As a result, after only a year, Camille's father's company made money, and therefore he was able to quit Christopher's company and run his own business. Although Stephen had to pay a certain percentage to the Christopher family for the duration of the company's operation, such payments were hardly felt at all. As a result, the family's welfare became much better. And in her third year, Camille was able to switch to full-time study in order not to miss important practice, which is of great importance in her profession. Little Jenna grew up in love and care. At first, the little girl would often ask about when her mom was coming to take her home. How is her relationship with her new uncle? But soon the questioning stopped. Of course, no one ever came for the little girl, and the police did not receive a single missing child report. Most likely, the woman was even glad that she was able to get rid of her daughter, who interfered with her personal happiness. But Camille judged Camille solely from her own perspective. Jenna began to see Camille as her mother. A few times from the guardianship authorities did come with checks, and each time the results were satisfactory. Soon the inspections stopped altogether, and therefore the girl had nothing to remind her that she was growing up as a foster child. This is how life can turn 180 degrees, and a desperate situation can seem like a small thing that can be solved in just one day. And a sudden meeting can not only change a life, but even save it. After all, who knows what could have happened to little Jenna if she had continued to live in the basement of a dilapidated old house.